Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by no other than Chax Training and Consulting. And if you're interested in supporting the podcast, there are sponsorship opportunities available. So just reach out to us and we can discuss that opportunity in more detail. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am Director of Media Productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you want to get your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and check out all the different kinds of certifications that the IAAP has to offer. So Chad, how you doing, man?
Doing well, buddy. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Not too bad. It's been hot, but I will tell you, we have our rabbits. We have a new big, it's not really a swamp cooler, but it is. It's the, water over the fan kind of thing, but it's doing fantastic. And in between some of the other things, they literally have a mist waterfall that trickles down this big giant screen in front of the opening to their area. And then they've got a giant swamp cooler in there. And so right now it can be 102, 103 outside, and it's like 85 inside that area. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like your rabbits live a better life than I do.
Hey, last year it did not work out so well. We actually lost a rabbit last year.
Man.
So we learning curve, it's all good. And
I'll tell you, here in the Northeast, yesterday it got up to 99 and the humidity was like 90%, I think.
Ooh.
So it's just been really it's been a brutal heat wave. And I know all of our listeners, any of our listeners who are also in the Northeast are understanding, what we're dealing with right now. And it doesn't really seem like there's any reprieve in sight. The next week is like upper 90s, it's crazy.
I hear you.
But anyway, so today we wanted to talk about a couple of different things. We wanted to talk about, we've talked about tables before in the past, right, Dax? But specifically today, we wanted to talk more about, building tables with accessibility in mind. And some things to watch out for, right?
Yeah.
So some things to kind of, as you're, again, as designers, right? Or as document creators, when we use tables to put a lot of information in a small area, right? Because that's what a table does for us, right? A table allows us to tell a story or convey a lot of information in a fairly small regional area. That's kind of the benefit of using a table, right? And so we can categorize the information. But as we're building those tables, sometimes we think we're doing things in a way that is going to make this information easy to interpret, but sometimes we do things that can cause problems, not only from an accessibility standpoint, but just from an understanding standpoint, as a general rule.
Well, it's I think it's one of those things that I think people struggle with so much because, like you said, tables are so versatile. We use them for so many different things. And then when you start thinking about accessibility and you get an irregular table error, or someone tells you, table has no headers, you're like, well, I don't understand what's going on here. It's changing the mindset of what a table is for and understanding how a person with a disability might be presented with that table. Not how they use it, not how a person might use it, but how is it presented? Because if I'm hearing data one way or another, it's going to influence how I'm going to maneuver around that. And does the way it's presented to me make it more confusing or less confusing to get to that data, right?
Right. And just like, how you and I will often preach from an accessibility standpoint, we'll often ask people, what is the intent? Right. And that applies to, writing alt text for images. It also applies to, other elements, right, of making content accessible. And so I would tell people to do the same thing when they're building a table, right? What is the intent? Like, what are you trying to convey when you build this table? And I think answering that question can be really beneficial. Again, this part of it is kind of outside of accessibility, right? I mean, right. I think first and foremost, you want to make your table easy to understand. And of course, we want to do that for all users, but you want to make it easy to understand as you're designing the table, because a lot of times people tend to overcomplicate tables. I have seen this time and time again, and as a matter of fact, I brought this up on a previous podcast where I was working with a client and we were dealing with a very challenging table. And as I was walking the client through, because I had to ask the client again, what is the intent, or what are you trying to tell me with this table? Because it was overcomplicated. And during the process, the client looked at the table and said, you know what? We don't need that header cell.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like, I always say, Dax, you and I are, when we go in and consult with clients, we often ask the question that nobody else wants to ask. And that question is why?
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, yep. I'm not afraid to ask that question, but I think a lot of times customers are. You know what I mean? Other people are afraid to ask that question. And it is, I would say it's the best question you can ask somebody. Ask them why. Why is the table built this way? Why, are we doing it this way? And does it make sense? And oftentimes when you force somebody to evaluate it, they often answer their own question, or they often look at it and they're like, oh, wow, we really don't need this part to convey the information that we're trying to, try to convey.
Well, it's the process of self-discovery, right? It is when you have to answer the question of why did I put this in here? What am I hoping that the user is going to get out of it? And am I presenting it in a way that meets that goal, right? You really have to kind of justify why it's there. You have to defend that position. It's kind of like a research paper when you have to defend your paper, right? Why, how did you come up with this? Why are you doing it this way? Where did you get your data from? That kind of thing. But in a table, it's like, okay, why am I presenting this way? How come there's so many different compartments to this table? And you're like, well, there was still space left in the page, so I decided to just add some more stuff because it just looked good. You're like,
I swear that's the reason, right? You know what I mean? Oftentimes you look at these tables and like somebody felt like they had to fill this space with something, and there's really no inherent reason for it. So I guess all that to say, Dax, I guess what we're trying to say is, when it comes to accessibility, the simpler your table is, the better. I mean, I think we could make that blanket statement. And so as you're designing your tables, try to think about what you're trying to convey. What information are you trying to explain to people, or what information are you trying to make accessible to people? And simplify that table as much as possible. Dax, I'm currently working on the material for our webinar next week, which is accessible tables. And one of the things that I'm doing, and this is kind of fun for me, right, is I'm trying to build the worst examples of some of these tables, try to say like, okay, like check this out. Don't do this, but this is why this is a problem, right?
Chad, let me give you some helpful advice on that. It's called Google. And if you just Google PDF and start looking at PDF reports, I guarantee you will find some samples of tables that should not be. And it's public facing material. So if you post it on the web, you're fair game. That doesn't mean I'm going to call out a company, but at least it's good cannon fodder. I'll remove the company names to protect the innocent. But yeah, I find just looking at PDFs that are online, man, you get the things you never thought were possible in a table, a table within a table, right? I mean, that's
yes,
a whole thing. So yeah,
that was a recent post on our Facebook group, wasn't it?
Right.
Where somebody's like, how do I make a table embedded into a table cell accessible? And we're like, stop. Don't
do it. Please don't do it. Well, you know what, Chad, I think this is such a valuable topic, right? Because really we all struggle with tables, and for our listeners, here's some actionable things. Let me give you a couple of different things that you should be thinking about, right? Here's some red flags that should tell you, stop. Okay. Do I have multiple column headers? That means now in the beginning of a table, you could have a couple of stacked table, column headers, row 1, row 2 could be stacked. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But the moment you start having data interrupted by column headers in the middle of your table, or, compartmentalizing a single table into different sections by column header, you are opening yourself up for a lot of extra work, unless you're using tools like Access PDF or, maybe even Common Look, where you might restructure the back end of the table. But either way, you're designing yourself into more work, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the best approaches that we give people is, instead of using those column headers that span the entire table, just make a new column and make it a row header, right? Because row headers never stack. Right? That's the beauty of it. Row headers never stack. So if you have a column 1 that has Western and then Southern and Northern as a row header, you never have to worry about a screen reader trying to read all of those one right after the other. It is, one of the things I find when people can get their head around that kind of decision-making process, they just cut themselves out of work. Why do extra accessibility work if you don't have to?
Of course. Yeah. And so here's another common issue we run into with tables. People will put the title of the table in the header cell of the table.
Oh, yeah. No, I hear you there. It's that first row. You decide, I'm going to put it in here and make it reverse blue, and then text is white, and right? Because it looks nice.
Yeah. And I think they do it because they're like, oh, well, this is part of the table as well. I should put this in a table. And the reality is that that's not a great approach. And the reason is because that title is going to repeat throughout the table. Like,
right, you're going to have to put scope on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it's a header cell, you have to tag it as a header cell. And so every data cell you read, or I should say, every time you change a column in that table, it's going to repeat that header cell. So it's just not a great experience. You're going to contradict me, aren't you?
Interesting though, Chad. So think about that experience. I'm thinking about it because, I'm an avid screen reader user. I use it all the time. I consider myself proficient. Mm-hmm. When does a screen reader, I'll ask you the question, when does a screen reader tell you new column or row information?
As you change the column that you're in.
Right. So if I'm in column 1 and I move to the right to column 2, what changed, the row header or the column header?
Oh, that's...
No, keep going with it. I got to walk through it with me. Find the end result.
Okay, so in my mind, right, in my mind, I'm envisioning a spanned, a cell that spans all the columns,
right,
and that contains the title of the table,
right.
And you're bringing up a good point. So if I move to a different column, that header row or that header cell is not changing, so it will not repeat that header row, will it?
Right, because if you have, let's paint the picture for everyone listening. Your row 1 is one header that spans the entire table. Then you have 5 columns that have, I don't know, months: January, February, March, April, May, June, whatever, right? The only time a screen reader repeats the heading or voices the heading, whether it be a column or a row, is when you change from one column or row. And so if you have a column header that spans the entire table, you are never moving outside of that column. You're always underneath it. So what's going to be voiced? Only the column headers that change. Right. And so I never thought about that, Chad, until this very moment, because I am 100% with you. We always teach never put the title inside the top of the table. Now, I will tell you, it's still, even though it's not going to be voiced by the screen reader, it's still bad practice, right?
Yeah, I would still argue that.
Yeah, and you shouldn't do it. Or be prepared to go into the table and just pull that P tag out of that first row, the TR, and delete it, right? So you could totally do it and be just fine. But just realize that if you've got 50 tables that you did this for, you're going to have to go in 50 times and pull that P tag out to make a table that makes sense, right? Because you want a good user experience, and, having proper formatting is part of that good user experience. And it's really part of just, good housekeeping when it comes to creating tables. So interesting that, about that. It is,
I think you and I just discovered something, as we were talking about. But to be clear for all of our listeners, right? The recommended approach is to make the table header just a text heading, right? Like an H1 through H6, whatever is appropriate in the area, and then the table follows that heading. Well, and so Dax, what I would argue with you about on that. I would argue that provides a better experience because the user could now jump from heading to heading.
Right.
And it would read the name of the table, and then they can read below, although they could also just jump from table to table.
Right.
And almost achieve a similar result. So it's an interesting conundrum, I think. Yeah.
But I think what we're doing here, really, if you're listening to this podcast right now, I hope that you're reading between the lines here. Because what are we doing? Chad and I are sitting here considering, what is the user experience going to be? How would someone possibly navigate? Okay, well, if I take my title out of my table, my figure, a lot of times it's figure 4.5, table of peanut butter sales for 2022, right? But we almost never create a heading level for that. It's almost never H2 or H3 or H4, because where that table sits on the page can change, right? If I have let's just say I only have an H2 at the top of that table on page 3. Well, at the top of the page on page 3. Well, then my table now becomes a H3, right? But on the next page, let's say I have an H1. Now my table header is now an H2, right? Because it can't stay in H3 because you now have skipped from H1 to H3. So having an H level designated as a table title could be problematic if you're trying to create a consistent user experience, right? I would almost want to make sure that it's a caption every time, right? That seems like it'd be more programmatically correct to have my figure label as a caption and then my table, right?
Sure.
Right. But we know, right? One thing to point out to everyone, remember that PDF UA says your caption tag should be the first tag inside your table tag. But we know screen readers right now do not read that. They will not voice the caption when it's inside the table structure. So you kind of have to cheat a little bit and make sure you pull that caption tag out of the table structure and make sure that it's above, that you have, caption tag, your caption, and then the table tag and your table. So it's, interesting. Well, the other thing to remember too is that there are tools out there that help make this easier. So if you say, look, I need to have a table this certain way, and I want it to be complex because it's the way I want to present the data, but I want the headers to be read the way that they should be. Where, and we use this example all the time, where you've got a column header every fifth row because it's geographically separating the table, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got, northern, southern, western, and there's a couple of data rows in between those. You can have that be read correctly. You just have to set cell IDs. And we all know cell IDs. I'm sure that some of you listening, as soon as I said the word cell ID, the hairs on the back of your neck stood up. But there are tools out there that help you do that easier. I mean, Access for Word, right? Access Word is a plugin for Word that allows you to actually set up some styles inside your table. I wish InDesign worked this way. Allows you to set up your styles for different rows, and you can designate those kind of split column headers just like you would want them to be, and they'll be read pretty close to the way you want. And Access PDF allows you to go in after the fact and very quickly tag those different column headers appropriately. So only the column header applies to the next 5 rows, and then the second column header applies to the next 5 rows. Well, Chad, I mean, we've got a YouTube video on our channel, right? That even shows how to do this, right?
Yeah. If you go to our Accessibility Unraveled YouTube channel, you will find a video. It's called Accessible Complex Tables. And it happens to show using Access PDF. And it basically shows you like how you could take, a table that we basically tell you not to create.
Right.
You know what I mean? As a
badly
general rule.
Formatted table, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can actually make it compliant. And that's a really good point to just kind of bring up. I worked in this business for years using Acrobat alone. Right.
Right. Me too.
And I kind of taught myself, right. And I figured out how to do all of these nuanced things. But I got to tell you, like, over the years, I have just really seen the value of third-party products. And I'm not restricted to one particular product. I mean, Access Word, Access PDF saves me so much time, right? I mean, the ability to level up my tags alone in Access PDF. I mean, now when I make a PDF, I take it into Access PDF and I level up all the tags, and it just makes it so much easier for me to walk the tags tree, and it takes 10 seconds. You know what I mean? And it's amazing. But this video will walk you through how you could take one of these complex tables and make it compliant and create the header cell ID associations within a table. And it's if you've ever tried to do it in Acrobat, you're going to love this video. It's going to blow your mind.
Well, Chad, I started the same way with you did, right? I started inside Acrobat, and all I had was Acrobat. That's all I knew. And then I got Common Look, and Common Look, the tool is great. It gives you a visual editor of your table that works better than Acrobat's editor. It allows you to play with your table and insert columns and rows and look at it visually and recurse those cell IDs, basically set all those cell IDs. But what it doesn't allow you to do is set up complex relationships between different cell IDs very easily. You can do it and you can set the cell IDs, but not in a kind of a point and click kind of way. So I used Common Look for a couple of years, and I love Common Look. It's a great tool. And then I got exposed to Access PDF, and my mind was literally blown. I literally felt sick to my stomach thinking about all of the time that I had spent on complex tables, trying to make them right, reorganizing tags, moving TDs and TRs and creating new ones and all of that. And I'm just like, why did I not know about this sooner? And I'm telling you guys, this is not from a sales standpoint. I'm telling you strictly from one remediator to another. If you haven't seen this video, go watch it. I promise you, it will open some doors for you to the possibilities of how much time it can save. So anyway, that's my pitch. But again, it's not a pitch. It's a useful tool. And honestly, if it wasn't useful, I wouldn't tell you guys about it. Chad and I, this is a good point, Chad. Chad and I are very agnostic to the tools that we use. We may, have relationships with certain companies, but I will tell you that I'm never going to promote a tool I don't believe in. I'm never going to tell you, go use this tool just because I'm getting some kind of kickback or some sign-up bonus or whatever, right?
No, we're really saying it because I don't want to see people wasting their time, right? I mean, I don't want to openly admit how many hours I spent in past years on projects, getting them compliant, because I didn't know any better. I thought that Acrobat was the only game in town, and that's what I had to use. But as time moved on, and I realized that there were other products out there, there's a reason that they're out there, because the software, and this applies to Acrobat, it applies to source applications, they all fall short. And fortunately, companies have come forward and said, hey, we can do this better. And, it just makes sense to take advantage of those products.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know the tools out there, you don't know what's possible, right? And so I think that, hopefully the people who are listening to this podcast get the idea that there are some ways out there, that some tools out there that can help you. And Chad and I are here. Our PDF Accessibility Facebook group is over 2,600 members. Chad, I was thinking about this just the other day. I remember when I first created that group, and I just was like 50 members, 100 members. Yeah. And I was like, yes, I've reached 500 members. And I just, to watch the people who have been in that group, where their journey in accessibility it's really been a blessing for me, to get the private messages we get from time to time, people telling us how much they've learned or how much they've grown, or the fact that they've gotten a raise because they now know more, all of that. It just makes my heart feel so good.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've said this before, but I just feel like it's really cool to see people that you've helped in the past now helping other people, right? It's the whole pay it forward concept, and so now people, get on the Facebook group and they're like, hey, I'm having a problem with this. And other people are now saying, hey, this is how you fix that. That is the coolest thing to me. Yeah. It's just so cool to see people's knowledge grow and to see them, helping other people with their problems.
Well, it's interesting because I think at first it was kind of me, you, Colleen Gratzer, and a few other people kind of fielding a lot of the questions. And now I can actually, I monitor that Facebook group pretty closely. I mean, it's open right now. I'm looking at, the group right now. I'm always kind of watching it, but I don't have to inspect every single post now to try to figure out whether or not people are giving the right answers, because generally they do. Right. I mean, every once in a while you get somebody will bring up something maybe that isn't quite the right way, and we kind of steer them toward the right solution. Sure. But it's so great to be able to see them. So if you're not part of our Facebook group, please go check it out. It can definitely help you.
It's free.
Yeah. Well, Chad, we've been talking about tables this whole time, and I hope everybody's still listening, because I want to do something here. Our class, we've got this accessible tables class coming up next Wednesday. I'm going to launch this podcast on Monday. Normally we launch on Tuesday, but I'm going to launch on Monday to give people a little extra time. But here's what I want to do. I want to give people 50% off this class, man.
Okay.
I think it's important. I think that, if you haven't been to one of our classes, this is going to give you a low risk way to kind of see what we do and get the information. It's 3 hours for $150. That's $50 an hour. That is, it's a great bargain. It is a deal, and you're going to get stuff like understanding the basic table structure and best practices. How do you work with symbols and colors? How to deal with layout tables, and editing tables in Acrobat, which I think is a complex thing that I think people don't always get, is okay, how do I keep myself sane while trying to edit a table? And I think you're going to talk about how to use Callus PDF Go HTML, right? I mean, that's a tool that you can use in combination with editing your PDF table. Yeah.
For evaluating your table. Yeah. I mean, it's for me, it's like one of my favorite tools because it just shows you your mistakes. You know what I mean?
Right.
It makes your mistakes very obvious. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't line up. What's going on here? You know? So yeah, we'll definitely be reviewing that for sure.
All right. So here's how you get it, guys. Go to the website, accessibilityunraveled.com. Click on it's right on the homepage, right below our little video. Click on the class for the accessible tables, hit the enroll now, and at checkout, use the coupon code Monday at checkout. And if you register today, the day this podcast is launched, if you register today, we're going to give you 50% off. That's half. $150, but you got to do it today. Our class is on Wednesday. So go to accessibilityunraveled.com, click on the tables class and use coupon code Monday and you'll get 50% off at checkout.
Fantastic. One of the challenges that we were running into in the first couple of webinars that we had done was some people in certain geographic regions were not able to sign up for the webinar.
Right.
And thanks to you and some investigation on your part, you figured out a way around that. And so in all of our active webinars currently, we have removed the geographic limitations that existed previously. So if you're I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Finland. I think it was
so there still are some geographic limitations. So Zoom allows for, when you have a paid Zoom event, then you have a more restrictive area that people can attend from, because Zoom, it has to do with money and taxes and all of the paid content and all of that. Right. So what we did was we took the checkout system out of Zoom so that you can check out on your own. It's and basically allows us to remove those limitations, but there are still some limitations no matter whether it's a free or paid event. If you live in Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Syria, or the Ukraine, you still cannot attend a Zoom event. And we're trying to find ways around that. But that's just the limitations of Zoom, no matter where you are, what's going on, right? So all of that to say, guys, we've removed some of the geographic limitations that we had before. So go ahead and go to our website, get that 50% off. We want to see you in class, right? We want you to be there. We've got some great handouts for you. Chad's got some good stuff to give away, and we'd love to see you there. What about some LinkedIn memberships, Chad? Some LinkedIn learning memberships. I thought maybe we were talking about giving some of that away for the class.
Yeah, let's do it. I was able to get some LinkedIn premium memberships that we can give away. So why don't we go ahead and do that?
All right. So if you sign up for the class, not only are you going to get handouts, you're going to get 50% off. You're also going to get how many months, Chad, of LinkedIn?
I think it's a 3 month. I think you get LinkedIn Premium for 3 months.
3 months of LinkedIn Premium. I can't, that's a deal you can't pass up. Anyway, we've talked long enough about that. Chad, why don't you take us out, man?
All right, man. So once again, we want to thank Chax Training and Consulting for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. And just remember, if you're looking for in-person or online training or struggling to establish an accessibility program within your organization, head over to accessibilityunraveled.com. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.